Let's talk about the rush that can turn minutes into a cycle. And it's cocaine's little brother, crack. Crack cocaine. So what is crack cocaine? Well, crack is a smokable form of cocaine. And a lot of what I'm going to say is copy-paste from yesterday. But let's get straight into this. So crack contains the same primary psychoactive drug as powdered cocaine, which is cocaine. But the major difference isn't that crack is a completely different drug. It's how the cocaine is formulated and delivered. When smoked, cocaine reaches the brain extremely fast. And that produces a very fast and intense effect. And that speed is one reason why crack can be particularly reinforcing. So what is crack made of? Well, the addictive drug is cocaine. Crack is generally produced by converting cocaine hydrochloride into a form that can be vaporized and inhaled. Street products can contain a lot of unknown contaminants and other substances. But again, like I said, for this talk, we're not going to talk about manufacturing recipes because we're not here to teach you how to make the stuff. We have to educate you about what these things are. And the important educational point is that crack cocaine is delivered in a form that can be smoked. You see, illicit drugs aren't reliably manufactured or regulated. And a person may also have no reliable way of knowing the actual strength or contaminants in a particular sample. So crack, you just never know what is mixed in there. How is crack used? Excuse me. Well, again, it's smoked. And when inhaled, cocaine passes through the lungs in the bloodstream and reaches the brain very quickly. This process it's a very rapid sequence. It's smoke, lungs, bloodstream, brain, intense effect. You compare that with the slower route of administration of snorting it. So the faster the drug reaches the brain, the more immediate that connection between behavior, drug, and reward happens. And that's one reason rapid onset drugs can create a powerful conditioning. And that brings me to what happens in the brain. So crack produces its effects primarily through cocaine's effect on neurotransmitter transporters. And again, we're speaking a lot about what we said yesterday. It blocks the reuptake of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Now, dopamine is particularly important to the addiction cycle, as we've discussed before. You see, when dopamine signaling is increased in reward-related brain circuits, the brain learns that the experience was important. I need to do that again. The problem is that the reward arrives very, very quickly with crack. And the effect also wears off relatively quickly. And that creates one powerful cycle like this, just brrr. Okay? So what does the high feel like? Well, many people will experience intense euphoria, increased energy, alertness, confidence, excitement, very talkative, a high increase in sexual arousal, and a reduced appetite. But people can also experience things like anxiety, irritability, paranoia, agitation, panic, a racing heartbeat, and higher exposures can see serious medical complications. So it's a very, very dangerous drug. And the question is, why can crack be addictive or so addictive? And I think I've answered that, but let's discuss it. It's probably the most important thing to talk about as well. You see, the effect can be very fast and intense, but it doesn't last very long. So the brain starts to learn. You smoke it, you feel the rush, the high starts fading, you start craving, you smoke again. And a person can find themselves repeatedly using within a very short period of time. Eventually, they might not even be chasing the original euphoria. They're just chasing relief from the crash of coming down. So the crack cocaine cycle looks like this. Stage 1 is anticipation, where you're going, I want that feeling. Stage 2 is the use, where the drug is smoked. Stage 3 is the rush, and it's a powerful, where a powerful reward arrives, and it arrives fast. Stage 4 is the decline, and that's where the effects of the crack starts disappearing. All right, it starts fading away. Then you get the craving, which is stage 5, where the brain remembers that reward. And then stage 6 is the reuse of it, where you're going, just one more. And then the whole cycle starts repeating again. And this is why someone can begin using with the intention of having a small amount and end up spending hours, months, years just chasing the next hit. So what does crack do to the body? Well, because cocaine strongly stimulates the cardiovascular and nervous systems in the body, crack can cause an increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, constricted blood vessels, increased body temperature, stuff like agitation and tremors and anxiety. But in real serious complications can also include things like heart attacks, strokes, dangerous heart rhythms, seizures, severe overheating, loss of consciousness, and in some cases death. And this is important because overdose can happen even when someone believes they know their usual amount. You see, illicit drugs can vary in potency and contain very unexpected substances. Crack is not pure. 9 out of 10 times, or 99% of the time, it is a mixture. All right. And then what about the lungs? Because it is an inhalant. Well, smoking crack exposes the lungs to heated chemicals and irritants. And the possible problems include, obviously, coughing, chest pain, shortness of breath, lung irritation, respiratory complications. You see, people who smoke crack can also experience serious pulmonary problems. Chest pains following crack use should never simply be put aside as it's the drug, because it can really represent a medical emergency. It's not just the drug, it's what the drug does to you. So what happens when the high ends? And this is what we call a crash. All right. A person will feel exhausted. They can feel depressed, irritable, probably facing a lot of anxiety, an increased appetite. They'll be very sleepy, probably have a lot of strong cravings, obviously. They'll have difficulty in concentrating, and they're emotionally empty, which happens with a lot of addiction substances. And this starts creating very dangerous thoughts of, I feel terrible. I know what will fix that. And that is the addiction now reinforcing itself. Let's talk about withdrawal. So crack withdrawal generally doesn't produce the same potentially life-threatening physical withdrawal syndromes associated with severe alcohol or benzodependence. But psychological withdrawal can be extremely difficult. Symptoms can include things like depression, fatigue, anxiety, irritability, sleeping problems, increased appetite, difficulty experiencing pleasure, because obviously it's a powerful pleasure upper, if I can word it like that, and very powerful cravings. For some people, the hardest part isn't the physical pain, it's the emotional emptiness that comes with that withdrawal. And then the nothing feels good problem, which comes about. And this is something that I should explain very carefully to people in recovery. You see, after repeated stimulant use, normal rewards can temporarily feel weak compared with the enormous reinforcements associated with the drug. So a person might think that their family doesn't make them happy anymore, their hobbies don't interest them, they don't enjoy anything, and that sobriety is not working for them. But this doesn't mean that life has become meaningless. It's part of the brain and the behavior of adapting to life without that stimulant. You see, recovery takes time. And healthy rewards need to become meaningful again. And you got to learn that. The financial trap, because obviously every addiction has a financial trap, and crack can become financially devastating because the effect is so short-lived and repeated use can occur during one session. Money disappears very quickly. So the cycle can look like it's money. You get the money, you get the drugs, you get a temporary relief, you get more cravings, you need more money. And eventually people in this type of addiction will end up borrowing, lying, selling possessions. They'll start missing work, neglecting bills, stealing, damaging relationships. And the consequences just create stress, and the stress creates cravings, and the cravings create more use, and it is a vicious cycle. The addiction becomes self-funding basically through destruction. So just crack and other drugs, crack while using other drugs, if I can word it that way. So polydrug use makes everything even more complicated. You find people combine crack with things like alcohol or weed, opioids, benzos, other stimulants as well. And combining substances can make effects less predictable and increase medical risks. One very important combination is cocaine and alcohol, like I discussed yesterday. You see, the body can form a substance called cocaethylene, which can increase toxicity and cardiovascular risk. So that whole idea of I'll drink while I smoke to balance it out is not a safe strategy. It is a strategy straight to your grave. How difficult is the recovery from crack? Again, and I'm going to say this every single time, we can't give a fake number that 30% of crack addicts recover. I don't believe in that percentage story. There isn't a single percentage that accurately describes anybody's chance of recovery. Recovery all depends on the severity of use, the duration of addiction, mental health, if other substances were involved, your living environment, your support structures, the treatment access that you're able to get, your motivation, because getting sober and clean is a lot of it is on you yourself, your relapse triggers and your stability after treatment. But recovery is absolutely possible. It can be done. And there's a lot of evidence to that. And funny enough, evidence-supported approaches include things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is learning to identify your thoughts, your triggers, your behaviors associated with that use. Contingency management, which is using structured rewards to reinforce abstinence and treatment participation. You got motivational interventions, which is strengthening a person's reason for change. Your peer support, which is obviously vital in any sort of addiction recovery, which is building relationships with people who understand addiction and recovery. And residential treatment, which is also important because for some people, removing themselves from the environment in which they used is important. In fact, I say for some people, I believe all people, you need to get out that environment. What is the relapse trap? Well, crack relapse can be triggered by the smallest things, the same as cocaine. You might encounter an old friend that uses, or you might go past a certain neighborhood. Payday, dangerous. You might go to a nightclub. You might be drinking a certain smell, a song, a memory, an argument, or being lonely. And suddenly the brain just remembers that rush. And those are very, very common triggers. And you start romanticizing about that drug, that cocaine, that crack, and you end up relapsing. And that's why recovery requires more than a simple "I will never use again" attitude. You need to know what makes you want to use and what are you going to do when that trigger appears. That is what's important. My recovery message on this is that crack is a powerful example of how addiction can turn minutes of pleasure into hours, days, years worth of consequences. The drug gives you a rush. It then asks for another and another. And eventually, you are not chasing pleasure anymore. You are chasing normality. And that's the trap. The drug tells you one more hit and you'll feel okay. But the more you use, the more that okay becomes dependent on using. And that recovery breaks that bargain. You learn to tolerate the uncomfortable moments. You learn to experience ordinary pleasure again. You start rebuilding relationships. You learn to deal with stress without reaching for the pipe. And eventually something remarkable happens. The life that you thought was boring starts becoming the life you are trying to get back all along. So finally, my key takeaway is that crack doesn't just create a powerful high. It's a rapid delivery. Its rapid delivery can create a powerful learning loop. Rush, crash, craving, repeat. Recovery means breaking that loop and giving the brain and the person the time to rediscover rewards without the drugs. And God is always there. Without God, this is impossible, guys. I believe that. Tomorrow we're going to talk about TIC, methamphetamines. I'll see you there.